our next plenary speaker is Dr. Jonghwi Park from the Program Specialist in Education in UNESCO, United Nations University. Dr. Jonghwi Park is the head of Innovation and Education at UNU-IAS, a new thematic program that promotes the innovative and inclusive use of ICT to expand lifelong learning opportunities for sustainable development. She will give a talk about education and research for sustainable development, a perspective from United Nations University. And particularly, she'll be joining us online through the Zoom. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you. Please welcome her.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer and Professor Cho for inviting me to the Asia-Korea Conference on Science and Technology 2021. My name is Jonghwi Park, and I'm working for the United Nations University Institute for the Advanced Study of Sustainability. My talk today is not exactly on science or engineering innovation, but on the roles of education and the research in sustainable development for a UN agency's perspective. Before I start, I'm sure there are many people in the audience today who have never heard of UNU. Don't worry, you're not alone, because I also didn't know much about the UN University before I joined in November 2020. So let me begin with a brief introduction to UNU. UN University was established in 1972 by the UN General Assembly under the joint sponsorship of the UN and UNESCO. It serves as a bridge between the UN and academia and a solution-oriented research institute with important functions for postgraduate training and capacity building. The United Nations University encompasses 14 institutes located in 12 countries around the world, from Asia to Europe to Africa to Americas. The global UNU system is coordinated by the UNU headquarters in Tokyo, and in Asia, there are 3 UNU institutes, including International Institute for Global Health in Malaysia, UNU Macau, focusing on computer science and IT, and UNU-IS, which I belong to. Let me explain UNU-IS a bit more. The UNU-IAS is based in the headquarters in Tokyo and the only UN agency that offers postgraduate degree program. And it consists of 4 thematic areas, such as governance and sustainable development, biodiversity and society, water and natural resource management, and innovation and education. And we offer a master's in sustainability and PhD in sustainability science under these 4 programs. I hope this brief introduction helped you to understand what UNU is. Now, let's start the main part of the talk. I will first start with the roles of education in achieving the ambitious 17 goals of sustainable development, followed by how research can help to innovate education towards achieving the sustainable development. And finally, I would conclude my talk with a short intro of what UNU is currently doing and how we can work together. It's been already 6 years since the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are declared to achieve by 2030, and by now, many of us are aware of those 17 goals. The preparation of these 17 goals was started in 2014, where I was working for UNESCO. And when I first encountered these 17 goals, I was like, who came up with this endless list of goals? Who on earth even can remember all those goals? And what an indecisive leadership to entertain all these proposals from different UN agencies. But as ambitious as they can look, I soon realized that the world has become much more complicated than the Millennium Development Goal era, and one issue is inevitably interconnected with so many other issues, just like the current pandemic. So I'm now pretty much convinced that those 17 goals are very much essential and indispensable. That's exactly why education takes a pivotal role in paving the way to achieve the ambitious sustainability goals by 2030. There are two important roles of education in achieving SDGs. The first is education as a goal itself to achieve until 2030. And the other is education as a means to achieve the other SDGs. So let me first start with the first role. Many of us today, especially from the relatively developed and affluent East Asian countries, would think that access to education is no longer an issue in the 21st century. But you will be surprised by the figure that in 2018, 258 million children, or 18% of the total population of children, are still out of school. More strikingly, additional 24 million students are at risk of dropping out due to the COVID-19 disruption. And that's why the core of the Education 2030 agenda is to ensure inclusive and equitable education and lifelong learning for all, with 7 targets to achieve, such as equal access to basic education, technical vocational education, and higher education, with 3 means of implementation, such as quality teachers and school environment. Then, is the access to education all to achieve until 2030? No, even more serious issue we need to address is how much learning is actually taking place among the students in a school system. In a world average in 2019, only 54% of the children of grade 3 can read at the minimum proficiency level, with only 17% in sub-Saharan Africa and 47% in Central and Southern Asia. The pandemic actually made the situation worse and is projected to cause a significant fallback of reading proficiency in all parts of the world, as you can see here in the graph. So what does education or basic literacy level have to do with the sustainable development? First, the reading proficiency is strongly associated with the economic growth of the country. This is a graph from the OECD PISA results in 2018, the most recent one. And of course, it's a chicken and egg thing. The more educational expenditure a country can invest, the higher student performance may be. But a history of research by development agencies shows that those countries who heavily invested and prioritize their investment on human capital development has a solid result to bring them out of poverty faster and more effectively, just like what you saw in Japan, Singapore, and Korea, and now in Vietnam. But some people say the economic development is just one side of development, and we should not evaluate the development by only this economic growth. And that's right, actually. And the sustainable development should be measured by all different and diverse indicators. And among so many other indicators, I would like to show this one, the relation between the education attainment and life expectancy from OECD. As you can see, it is a common pattern that those who have tertiary education may outlive their counterparts with below upper secondary schooling by 2 years to as many as 10 years in case of Slovak Republic. France and Canada also shows 5 years longer life of those with tertiary education than their counterparts with below the secondary education. The report attributes such a result to the awareness of a healthy diet, importance of exercise, and awareness of self-hygiene. But the secondary education in some countries, let alone the tertiary education, is still a luxury in some of the countries. The regional patterns here are quite similar to the reading proficiency of the regional patterns that I showed you earlier, with sub-Saharan Africa less than 30% of the secondary completion rate, followed by Central and Southern Asia, and the world average is a little bit more than half of the population completing the secondary education. Then a question for the science community, like the scholars here today, is can innovation actually help education to be more inclusive? I believe so, but there are some important conditions to know before we jump into the innovation. Who are those marginalized people who have no access to education? And why are they not going to school, or what are the barriers for them to access education? What innovation can be done given the limited resources that those marginalized learners have, like a lack of stable electricity, let alone the internet access? And most importantly, once the innovation is done, how can we know that those interventions are effective and worth scaling up? I would like to leave these questions to the scholars today and collectively seek innovative and research-based solutions to these questions. We have looked at the education as an end to achieve as part of 17 SDG goals. But education has another important role. How can we educate people to become an active agent to achieve all those 17 goals? In fact, one of the 7 targets under the Education 2030 agenda is dedicated to educating all people to acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. It sounds like a brilliant target to achieve, right? But unfortunately, this education for sustainable development is not new, and actually it's been around for the last 30 years. If you think about the fact that the education for sustainable development has been around for the last 30 years, since 1992, and if education for sustainable development had worked, and the world leaders and business owners today had learned sufficient knowledge and skills to promote sustainable development, this figure from IPCC 6th report, the recent report, should not be there. We should not have a situation where we are facing the irreversible point of global warming. If the education for sustainability had worked, we should not have a situation where an estimated 92 million tons of textile waste is created each year, which is equivalent to a rubbish truck full of clothes ends up on the landfill sites every second. If education for sustainable development had worked, we should have been able to prevent 38,000 species from being at the blink of extinction. If education for sustainable development had worked, 1 in 5 premature deaths from air pollution could have been prevented. But obviously, the education for sustainable development did not work, and the consequences are as catastrophic as this. Why then did education for sustainable development work? One of the reasons that UNESCO analyzed is its overfocus on the cognitive dimension rather than the education that leads to behavior changes. For example, even if we know that plastic is bad for environment and it takes hundreds of years to decompose, it doesn't necessarily trigger us to change the course of behaviors of not using plastics. If you look at the tertiary education here of the climate change education, the behavioral dimension of climate change education is 0. So this is really a serious issue. Another issues with this stagnant education for sustainable development is lack of participation from the science community in designing and contextualizing the education program. Above all, I believe such scientific research-based ESD should promote informed local actions in every community around the globe. I would like to take this opportunity, speaking at this prestigious conference of scientists, to call for research-based education for sustainable development that leads to action-oriented lifelong learning in a local context. In this regard, I would like to introduce a few initiatives that UNU-IAS is undertaking related to what I have discussed and what I have introduced as the challenges of ESD. And I hope this segment of my talk would motivate some of you to work with us. As mentioned earlier, UNU offers a small postgraduate degree program from action-oriented and transdisciplinary approach. For this year, we have 34 students from 21 countries, and I'm very proud to say that 82% of whom are from developing countries. They are taking transdisciplinary approach to solving global issues in their own local contexts. And the students' projects examples include creating an awareness program for fishing community in the Philippines to prevent abandoned fishing gear for healthier marine ecosystem, and training to change millennials' behavior for minimizing personal transport emissions using smartphone applications in Beijing, Jakarta, and Ulaanbaatar. UNU-IAS is also launching a new postgraduate program on how to implement the Paris Agreement in collaboration with UNFCCC. The second initiative I'd like to introduce is the promotion of local actions on sustainable development. The Regional Centers of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development, or RCE, is a network of formal, non-formal, and informal education institutions for localizing education for sustainable development, and the UNU is the secretariat of the network. As of today, 181 members of local communities made their commitment to translate the to translating the global sustainability agenda to local actions that are relevant and feasible to the local context. I would like to emphasize that the roles of universities and scientific communities in this network is really vital in guiding the local actions and projects in the right direction. And well, 54% of the projects that we have supported between 2015 to 2019 are led by local universities. One of the good examples that I would like to introduce today is from RC Greater Eastern Uganda. The project is to prevent further deforestation in their local areas, and as we all know, preventing deforestation requires much more than just conducting a research. So led by a local university there, this RCE designed and implemented an awareness-raising program for local community and private sector, on how important the forest is as the lung of the country and the earth. And it was well informed by their research. Then the university didn't stop there and go further to educate local loggers to shift their income sources from logging to sustainable farming and even small startups to generate income without cutting and selling the trees. More information about this project and also more community engagement can be found in this recent publication by UNUIS. And the next publication in line is RCE, the same network's local actions on conserving biodiversity in next February. UNUIS also has another more university-oriented alliance. Promotion of Sustainability in Postgraduate Education and Research Network, which is quite long, but it has a very good name, ProsperNet, is a network of 52 leading universities across Asia Pacific. And they are committed to integrating sustainable development into university curriculum and advancing multidisciplinary research on sustainability. And Nanyang Technology University is actually one of the 42 members of the ProsperNet. One of the projects that I would like to introduce today from this ProsperNet network, university network, is integrating the disaster risk reduction and SDG into a joint degree program. This is carried out by our member universities, 5 universities, in fact, in the Asia Pacific region. And what is unique about this project is that 5 universities from disaster-prone countries in Asia, such as Thailand, Japan, and Indonesia, jointly conducted a research to map out various existing disaster risk reduction interventions and designed the curriculum based on the findings of their analysis. For more information, you can visit our ProsperNet website. And finally, UNUIS, together with UNESCO, is currently conducting a regional research on climate change displacement from human rights and justice perspective. In the world today, where I'm talking this sentence just for 2 seconds, there is 1 person displaced, and it adds up to 1% of the total population in 2019. You may think the refugee issues occur because of the wars and conflicts, but actually a much larger number of refugees and displacement are caused by climate disasters and climate change. The problem here is the international laws and conventions for refugees only recognizes refugees from political instability, conflict, and wars, not the climate change. So the UNU is looking at 5 countries in the region, including Bangladesh, Indonesia, India, Tuvalu, and Vietnam, and doing a research on how the national systems of these countries are ready to ensure the equal right to education of those people after they are forced out of their homes due to the climate change and disaster. I hope this introduction to UNU's current work help you to understand and try to find a area to collaborate. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your listening. And I would like to welcome an open discussion with an audience for the areas for collaboration. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.